59 foreigners described as wealthy tourists arrived in Phuket last night and headed into the VCASQ, a very comfortable alternate state quarantine called Villa Quarantine at the Si Phanwa Hotel on the east coast of the island's Cape Phanwa. It's the debut of Villa Quarantine, where guests will be given some special considerations. More about that later. 13 of these special tourists arrived around 8 last night on a chartered Garuda Airlines flight, flying from Indonesia to Phuket's rather underused international airport. After going through immigration and customs procedures, they were ushered into Terminal X, which is the facility established for charter traffic, where they were screened and tested for COVID-19. When I arrived at the airport this morning for a routine flight to the capital, the lights were on in the international terminal, the first time we've actually seen that in nearly a year. These special tourists even had a welcoming committee that included the island's deputy governor and the director of the Patong Hospital, along with a bevy of disease control officials, all masked up and ready to transport them to the upmarket resort on the east coast, a trip of 45 minutes or so. They were shuttled off to the hotel in vans with a police escort ahead and behind the group, so no stopping off at a 7-Eleven for a snack along the way. Another group arrived on a separate charter flight about 2 hours later, also from Indonesia. Interestingly, the 59 tourists aren't Indonesian. Instead, they're from the UK, France, Finland and the US. They'd converged in Indonesia before proceeding on chartered flights to Phuket. How they ended up in Indonesia, or who they are, and if they're otherwise linked in any way, has not been mentioned at this stage by officials. For the first days of the mandatory 14-day quarantine, the tourists will have to stay in their rooms. Not quite as difficult as staying in a 20 square metre viewless room in Bangkok. After all, Si Phanwa looks out across the waters surrounding Phuket and is one of the island's upmarket hotel offerings. But after the first 5 days, they will be able to use more of the facilities of the hotel. Presumably, they'll be the only guests at the hotel. Now, checking on a couple of booking apps, it looks like you can't actually get a room there to mingle with these special guests over the next 14 days, but you can check in after that if you've got about 26,000 baht a night to spare. We've had no confirmation of any golf quarantine arrivals as yet, but the government seems to have all stops out to attract any tourists at this stage, getting close to a year since they closed the borders amid increasingly desperate cries from Thailand's hotel, transport and aviation industries. How 59 special tourists will help the situation, well, we'll see. But the sticking point for attracting much in the way of more general traffic to Thailand still seems to be the quarantine. 14 days in a box. Even with a fabulous view, at your cost, it's going to remain the biggest barrier to any sort of tourism recovery. Speculation of tourist numbers, even at the lower end of the speculation, is expecting 3 to 5 million tourists to the country this year. Given the start, already nearly 2 months into the year, that's still a very optimistic prediction. Phuket has been particularly badly hit, its annual arrivals diving from some 8 million per year to virtually nothing. Like Samui and some of the other more remote islands, it hasn't had the benefit of any weekend traffic to keep the entertainment and tourist zones afloat. 59 people isn't much of a dent in an 8 million tourist market, but at least it's a start. Tim Newton reporting for the Thaiger.